My life seems perfect, ideal, even. A good job, decent friends, a cozy apartment, a shiny car, and Evelyn, my beautiful girlfriend. On paper, it's everything anyone could want. Sure, there are cracks here and there, but they're small, insignificant, easy to overlook. I've never felt the pull of wanderlust, which explains why I've never left my hometown. After all, if I wanted adventure, there's always the forest at the edge of town. Goss Wilderness. The woods stretch endlessly, a suffocating labyrinth of gnarled trees and shadows that whisper secrets to one another. Rumors swirl about the forest, ghosts, strange lights, even Bigfoot. Whatever truth may lie within has been buried, just like the childhood curiosity that once burned in us all. Now we fret over bills and deadlines, not what might lurk in the dark. When I was younger, I marveled at the infinite vastness of space, the billions of planets and galaxies suspended in a cosmic dance. Stars like VY Canis Majoris reminded me of how small and fleeting we are in the universe's endless sprawl. Yet, the thought didn't bother me. I was content with my insignificance so long as I had Evelyn. From the moment she smiled at me in middle school, I knew she was meant to be mine. Our connection felt fated, almost unnatural in its intensity. She introduced herself that day, her voice smooth as silk, her eyes locking onto mine as if she could peer into my very soul. When she smiled, it was like the air thickened, like her presence demanded more space than any human should. My friends teased me mercilessly, but I didn't care. By some twist of fate, she was assigned the desk next to mine, and from then on, she was my everything. Even when she touched me, her elbow brushing my side, it set off a sharp pain in my ribs. That pain had been there since the night before, when I dreamed of hands gripping my sides, squeezing until I couldn't breathe. But her concern was intoxicating. She asked if I was okay, her voice dripping with sincerity, and I lied, smiling through the pain. We were inseparable from that moment, and eventually, I found the courage to ask her out. To my astonishment, she said yes. Years passed, and our love remained unwavering, almost too perfect, too consuming. Evelyn wasn't just my girlfriend, she was my world. My dream of an ideal life seemed complete. But perfection, as I've learned, often masks something sinister. Work was a monotonous grind, the kind that gnawed at my sanity. That day, as I slogged through files, I overheard my coworkers whispering. "Have you heard about the bears?" one asked. "Yeah, wandering into neighborhoods." "Creepy," the other replied. "Not just wandering," the first continued. "Some just stand there, watching." I shuddered but dismissed the thought. Work wasn't the place for superstition. Just as I finished printing a stack of documents, my boss, John, appeared at the entrance to my cubicle. His face was stern, almost grim. "I need you to stay late tonight," he said, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "Why me?" I asked, dreading the answer. He leaned closer, his breath hot and stale. "You're the only one I can trust." Something about his words felt wrong, his tone too forceful, his smile too sharp. Still, I nodded, defeated. I slumped back into my chair as John retreated to his office, his footsteps echoing unnaturally in the empty space. By 5 o'clock, the office was deserted, leaving me alone with the oppressive silence. I called Evelyn. Her voice was bright, cheerful, but even her warmth couldn't banish the unease crawling under my skin. As we talked, I heard something soft, distant, like footsteps echoing in the dark corridors of the office. "Hold on," I murmured, cutting her off mid-sentence. The sound grew louder, closer. I turned, and the shadows behind me seemed to twist, to writhe. And then, I wasn't alone anymore. I began in a shaky voice, "Hey, I know we haven't done much together lately, but how about a date?" Her response was cheerful, her voice practically singing through the receiver. Of course I'd love to. I could almost see her smile, bright and perfect, the kind of smile that made you forget how cold the world really is. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Tomorrow then," Unless you're busy. Silly, I'm free. She teased, her voice a balm to my nerves. Great, I said, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I'll pick you up after work. See you then, okay? And don't overwork yourself. Promise, she said with a soft laugh before we hung up. The line went dead, but the warmth in her voice lingered, filling the emptiness of the office. A strange surge of happiness washed over me, an unnatural kind of joy, almost electric. My lips twisted into a grin so wide it hurt, but I didn't care. Just the thought of her made me feel complete. Taking a deep breath, I tried to refocus, typing away at the keyboard. The rhythmic click of the keys and the low hum of the printer filled the quiet space. Time seemed to stretch and blur, the office growing colder as the hours dragged on. By the time I finished the last load of work, it was 11:37. I bundled the papers into portfolios and shut off the lights, plunging the office into darkness. The silence was oppressive, thick and buzzing like static in my ears. As I walked to my car, I sent Evelyn a quick text. Good night, sweet dreams. I added a string of silly emojis hoping to make her smile. But when I slipped my phone back into my pocket, something made me pause. The night sky was brilliant, thousands of stars burning against the velvety blackness. The moon hung high, luminous and perfect, like a spotlight in the darkness. But something else caught my eye. A strange pattern of lights hovered in the sky green and blue, flickering unnaturally, as if they were trying to form a message. My stomach knotted. I told myself it was just a plane, passing silently overhead. Planes fly over all the time, delivering packages, ferrying people from one mundane place to another. But these lights weren't moving like a plane. They didn't blink, didn't follow the straight, predictable path of an aircraft. They seemed to be watching me, waiting. I started my car, trying to shake off the unease. The lights shifted, almost imperceptibly, but enough to make my chest tighten. They didn't leave until I began to drive, and even then, they seemed to follow me, keeping pace just above the tree line. When I finally pulled into my apartment complex, the lights vanished, melting into the depths of Goss Wilderness. I stared at the dark expanse of trees for a moment before forcing myself up the stairs. Checking my phone, I saw no reply from Evelyn. The next day, I sat alone in the break room, picking at a hot ham and cheese sandwich that had gone lukewarm in the microwave. Across from me, John devoured his fast food, barely glancing in my direction. The silence between us was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the vending machines. As I sipped my water, I couldn't shake the feeling that the lights hadn't really left me, that they were still out there, waiting, watching. He looked up from his burger, wiping grease from his fingers as his gaze sharpened. Got any plans tonight? I took a swig of water, my throat suddenly dry, and nodded. Yeah, actually. Evelyn and I are going out on a date. Problem is, I don't really know where to take her. I smiled awkwardly, hoping to shrug off my indecision. Evelyn? He repeated, his tone laced with a strange curiosity, like I'd just spoken a foreign name. He raised an eyebrow, his expression skeptical. She's my girlfriend, I explained, trying not to sound defensive. I introduced you to her a few months ago, remember? His eyes narrowed slightly, something unreadable flickering behind them. Sorry, I don't know what you're talking about, he said, popping a fry into his mouth. My stomach churned. You've met her, at the office party? She's unforgettable. Doesn't ring a bell, he said flatly, his gaze lingering on me just a moment too long. I forced a laugh, though irritation bubbled beneath the surface. No worries, I muttered, taking a bite of my sandwich. I'll just invite her over sometime to jog your memory. The rest of the day passed uneventfully, but his words lingered in my mind, clawing at the edges of my thoughts. By the time I was driving to Evelyn's apartment, my nerves were frayed. I glanced at my phone resting in one of the queue folders. Still no response from her. Maybe work was keeping her busy. That made sense. She always said she got lost in her projects. Pulling into her parking lot, I noticed her car wasn't there. Maybe it was in the garage, I reasoned, stepping out and walking to her door. The evening air was colder than usual, sharp and biting. I knocked and waited, smoothing out my shirt and running a hand through my hair. The seconds stretched into minutes. I pressed the doorbell several times, the chime echoing faintly within. Growing impatient, I leaned to peek through the window and froze. The living room was empty. No furniture, no pictures. Nothing to suggest anyone had ever lived there. My stomach dropped. Pounding on the door, I shouted her name. The noise drew the attention of a neighbor, a woman with piercing green eyes who glared at me from her door. "Quit that racket, or I'll call the cops," she snapped. "Wait," I stammered, turning to her. "You don't understand, my girlfriend lives here, Evelyn. We were supposed to. What are you talking about?" She interrupted, her voice sharp and impatient. "No one's lived in that apartment for over 20 years. Her words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at her unblinking. What do you mean?" She pinched the bridge of her nose, clearly irritated. "Are you dense, boy? I'm saying that apartment's been vacant for decades. If you're playing some kind of prank, I suggest you stop." With that, she slammed her door, leaving me standing there, stunned and hollow. I turned back to the apartment, my eyes falling on the "For Rent" sign staked in the yard. My hands trembled as I scrolled through my contacts, searching for her name. But she wasn't there. Her number, her parents' numbers, all of it gone. In their place were random strings of digits, numbers I'd never seen before. My photo album was no better. Every picture I swiped through showed me alone. Restaurants, parks, events, it was just me. The smiles in those photos weren't mine. They were forced, hollow, as if the person I used to be knew something I didn't. Panic surged, cold and suffocating. If I couldn't find answers here, there was only one place left to search: the forest. Evelyn loved that place, always talking about the wildlife, the berries, the sprawling trees. Maybe she'd gone there. Maybe she wanted to live among the silence and shadows. But even as I clung to that thought, doubt crept in. It didn't explain the empty apartment, or the missing photos, or the way her existence seemed to unravel, like threads pulled from a frayed tapestry. And it didn't explain why, for the first time in years, I felt utterly, completely alone. I had to end this madness, even if it meant heading into that cursed forest. The desolate road stretched before me, the setting sun barely managing to claw its last rays over the horizon, casting the woods into eerie shadows. The dirt path was uneven and treacherous, jarring the car as I sped through. Above me, a murder of crows cawed sharply, their black forms a fleeting omen against the darkening sky. As I delved deeper into the forest, the hum of life seemed to drain away. The soft rustle of foxes darting through the underbrush was all that remained, like whispers from unseen specters. The sun dipped below the horizon entirely, plunging the world into darkness. My headlights carved feeble beams through the oppressive black, but every twist and turn of the road unraveled my sense of direction. It felt as though the forest itself was conspiring to trap me, its maze-like paths folding in on themselves. But I couldn't stop. Not now. She was out there, she had to be. Each step forward was a desperate promise to myself that I'd find her. Then, a loud pop jolted me as the car sputtered and shuddered to a halt. Smoke billowed from the hood, clouding the windshield. Cursing under my breath, I slammed the steering wheel in frustration. My phone was useless, no service this deep in the wilderness. I was stranded, as good as dead if I didn't move fast. Grabbing a flashlight from the glove compartment, I burst out of the car and plunged into the dark forest. The path was long forgotten. I sprinted through the dense undergrowth, my legs burning with exhaustion as time seemed to stretch and warp. Every path I took ended the same way, blocked by walls of tightly packed trees, their ancient forms looming like silent sentinels. Panting heavily, I leaned against a sturdy oak, sweat dripping from my brow. The wind sighed through the branches, whispering secrets I couldn't understand. As I caught my breath, the forest fell eerily silent, too silent. Then I heard it. A grinding, metallic sound, like something heavy being dragged across stone. The noise reverberated through the trees, shaking their roots. My head snapped up as a brilliant light pierced the darkness ahead, growing brighter and brighter until it enveloped the clearing in an otherworldly glow. The light hovered before me, shifting and pulsing with vivid hues of green and red, illuminating the forest in unnatural clarity. For a fleeting moment, it felt like I could see the world for what it truly was: cruel, beautiful, and entirely indifferent. Then, without warning, the light lunged at me. It was blinding, overwhelming, and the world shattered into a kaleidoscope of violent, clashing colors. I woke up in my bed, my heart racing. My phone buzzed softly on the nightstand, its screen displaying a fully charged battery. The alarm had gone off at its usual time, yet everything felt off, groaning. I rubbed my eyes and forced myself to get dressed for work, my limbs heavy and sluggish. At the office, I slumped into my chair, the familiar murmur of coworkers filtering over the cubicle walls. Their chatter felt distant, hollow, like a poorly rehearsed script. "Morning, boss. How you doing?" John's chipper voice cut through the haze. I logged in and forced a weak smile. "I'm fine, just tired." "Well, you won't believe the night I had," he exclaimed. "The missus and I went out on the town dinner, a movie, the works." His enthusiasm grated against me, and I tried to focus on my screen. But something was wrong. As I struggled to recall my own evening, my memories became murky, like a fog rolling over my thoughts. All I could remember was the gas station on the edge of town near the forest. But why had I gone there? Why had I driven so far when there were closer stores nearby? "Well, I'll leave you to it," John said, slapping the cubicle wall before walking off. I stared blankly at the monitor, my hands motionless on the keyboard. The weight of the forest still clung to me, as if I'd left part of myself behind in its endless, suffocating shadows. Once John left, I sat staring at the bright monitor, the glow stinging my tired eyes. My mind churned, trying to recall what had happened, anything to explain the gnawing unease creeping up my spine. Probably nothing, I thought. I've always been prone to overthinking. That's what she used to say back in school. Wayne used to tell me that. I thought, the memory slipping in uninvited. But who was she? I couldn't recall her face, only the flash of a beautiful, charming smile. Maybe she was someone who moved away years ago. Or maybe I never really knew her at all. Shrugging off the thought, I started my rounds for the day. I exchanged pleasantries with neighbors, delivered a few documents to my boss, and joined him and two others for lunch. They joked about how their wives had them wrapped around their fingers, which made me laugh, though I couldn't say why. One of them turned to me, a smirk playing on his lips. "So how's Lily?" The name slipped off my tongue too easily. "She's great, although she's been a bit feisty lately." John chuckled, swallowing a bite of his sandwich. "Maybe it's that time of the month," he joked, taking a sip of his drink. "Come on, guys." "That's not funny," I blushed, poking at my plate of spaghetti. He waved his hands in mock apology, changing the topic to something more appropriate, but I wasn't listening. My mind wandered, digging into the memory of Lily, whoever she was. Images came flooding in, fragmented and vivid. Carnivals, hand-holding whispered words under the stars. They were sweet, almost painfully so, yet they didn't feel real. They felt implanted, as if someone had stitched them into my mind with cruel precision. The unease loomed heavier as the day dragged on. By the time I was ready to leave, my boss called me into his office. It wasn't unusual. He liked to chat after hours. Normally I didn't mind, but tonight I just wanted to escape. He rambled about his wife and their plans to travel, his words a dull hum in the back of my mind. "So any plans with her tonight?" he asked, his smile warm but probing. A smile forced itself onto my lips, unnatural and stiff, like invisible hands pulling the corners of my mouth. My voice came out unnervingly chipper, betraying the dull dread pooling in my chest. Oh, maybe the park, a late-night walk, or a movie. Something simple. He nodded, intrigued in a way that made my skin crawl. Sounds nice, but it didn't feel nice. Every word I said about her made my stomach churn. How could I speak so fondly of someone I hadn't thought about until today? It felt like I was being puppeted, the name Lily tumbling from my lips over and over. Or was it Lilith? The name shifted, slippery and elusive. As my boss droned on, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Grateful for the distraction, I pulled it out. A single message glowed on the screen, Lily. The name sent a shiver down my spine. Without another word, I bolted from the office, ignoring my boss's confused protest. I drove straight to the park, my hands gripping the wheel tightly. The setting sun painted the sky in bruised hues of orange and purple. Parking the car, I stumbled to a bench and sat, head tilted back, trying to piece together my fractured thoughts. Children's laughter pulled me from my reverie. Two kids chased each other on the grass, their giggles echoing in the still air. "You're it," one boy shouted, tagging the girl with a playful slap. She giggled, barely brushing his arm with her fingertips. "No, that doesn't count." He protested, halting the game. "Yes, it does. Stop complaining." She retorted, crossing her arms in triumph. A small, bitter smile formed on my lips at their innocence. But it faded just as quickly. "That's not fair, Eva." The boy whined, pushing her hard enough to send her tumbling. She landed with a soft thud, a whimper escaping her lips. "Ava," I murmured, the name tasting like ash. My gaze drifted, drawn inexorably to the dark edge of the forest just beyond the park. It loomed like a hungry maw, the gnarled trees shifting in the twilight. I couldn't look away. Something waited there, just out of sight. Something I had tried to forget. And then, from deep within the shadows, I saw it. A flicker of movement. A figure, waiting. Her name echoed in my ears, a sound both familiar and alien. It gnawed at me, pulling me forward. Standing from my seat, Eileen approached the woods. It didn't matter how far I had to go. I needed to be there. She was there. Who was she? The question slithered through my mind, but the answer stayed maddeningly out of reach. The forest buzzed with life. Small creatures darted through the underbrush, their movements erratic. Cicadas screamed louder than ever, their song a rising cacophony that clawed at my nerves. The deeper I ventured, the more oppressive the sound became, until it wasn't just a noise, it was a pressure, vibrating in my chest, threatening to burst my skull. I stumbled into a clearing, my breath hitching as I took in the sight. A wall of trees loomed before me, their gnarled branches weaving into an impenetrable barricade. The fading light of the day cast an orange glow across the scene, but instead of warmth, it felt sinister. The once vibrant hues bled into something darker, tainted. Then the forest fell silent. The air turned thick, as though every creature had vanished, leaving me stranded in the void. A gust of wind hissed through the trees, brushing against my skin and leaving a chill in its wake. It felt familiar, too familiar. And then I remembered her. She had gone missing yesterday. Or was it longer? Time twisted in my mind, slippery and unreliable. But this was the place. Everyone's whispers, everyone's warnings. They had led me here. A faint blinking light caught my eye, flickering from the far edge of the barricade. My feet moved on their own, drawn to the glow. It was a branch, its surface etched with a tiny, illegible inscription that glowed faintly. Wrapping my hand around it, I snapped it free. Rage surged through me, hot and consuming. Without thinking, I swung the branch against the tree, over and over, each strike releasing a guttural scream from my throat. The forest blurred around me as I gave in to my fury, the branch finally splintering in my hands. Blood pounding in my ears, I slammed my fists into the nearest tree, again and again. The bark gave way, revealing something black, something slick. It wasn't sap, it was liquid. It shimmered unnaturally, pooling at my feet. I reached out, my trembling fingers brushing its surface, and suddenly I was falling. The air shifted. I landed hard, but the ground beneath me wasn't dirt. It was smooth, cold, and impossibly dark. The clearing was gone, replaced by a vast expanse of blackness, illuminated only by dim balloon-like orbs of light floating in the void. It was both beautiful and horrifying. "Welcome home," a voice boomed, deep and resonant, echoing from everywhere and nowhere at once. I spun, searching for its source. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice trembling. A figure emerged from the void, its outline faint and shifting. There were no features, no face, just a humanoid shadow with a voice that dripped with an unnatural calm. "You've wandered too far this time," it said. "The program. It was too much for you, wasn't it?" "What are you talking about?" My voice cracked as I stumbled back. The figure didn't respond, but the ground beneath me changed. My reflection was gone, replaced by the clearing I had just escaped. But it was wrong. The trees were twisted into grotesque shapes, and the sky above was void of color. "You'll never return to your garden," the figure continued, its tone almost pitying. "Why did you leave? Why did you abandon perfection for her?" "She's not just a program," I screamed. "She's real." The figure tilted its head, as if studying me. "You've always been so stubborn. Humans, so fragile, so prone to breaking. But I'll fix you. In time." "I'm not broken," I growled, lunging at the figure. My hands passed through it like smoke. "You don't understand yet, but you will." The void around me shimmered, stars bursting into existence, infinite and overwhelming. This is where I watch. Over all that exists, all that will exist, and all that has ever been erased. My knees buckled as I stared into the abyss. "Am I dead?" The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, it turned away, its outline dissolving into the darkness. "There's no point in going back," it said finally. "You've escaped reality. That's a one-way ticket." The words hit me like a physical blow. My hands trembled as I sank to the ground, my mind racing to make sense of the impossible. And then, faintly, it spoke again, its voice tinged with something almost like regret. "She deleted you, Adam.